The moment you take that belief and you challenge the belief, then you can step into a world of options. Then you step into that rainbow of options as opposed to seeing the world in just white, just black, or black and white only.
That's Jon Rosemberg. He spent the last 2 decades blending business insight and cutting-edge research to help executives and teams shift from survival mode to thriving. Now he's sharing some of that wisdom in his new book, A Guide to Thriving, the science behind breaking old patterns, reclaiming your agency, and finding meaning. So you'll learn 1, the difference between succeeding and thriving, 2, how to shift out of survival mode with A.I.R, and 3, how to spot and challenge limiting beliefs. And if you'd like a quick summary write-up of the actionable takeaways that Jon shares, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget emails found at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mockaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Jon. Jon, welcome.
Hi, Pete. It's good to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk about thriving. You got a whole guide to thriving, so let's discuss that exactly. But first, could you maybe contrast? You talk about thriving versus survival mode. Could you paint a little bit of a picture of what each feels like in practice?
For sure. And Pete, have you ever felt like you're in survival mode?
I think the answer is yes.
Yes. And what does that feel like?
Oh, well, it's not pleasant. It's sort of like just trying to get through the day and the responsibilities and the stuff and the calendar and the to-do list. It's a little bit harried, hurried, rushed, stressed, maybe elevated heart rate and more.
That's a beautiful definition of survival mode. And what I especially loved about your definition was that initial exhale. So yes, that is survival mode. And survival mode, evolutionarily speaking, is a highly adaptive mode to be in. A few thousand years ago, if you were in the savannah and you heard, like a rustle in the bushes, going into survival mode was really helpful because it allows us to focus all of our energy on what we need to do to survive. And it can be really, really helpful. However, today, most of the challenges and threats that we face are not physical. They are psychological. So survival mode sometimes gets triggered in moments that may not necessarily be the most helpful.
Understood. And that picture is nice. I just recently saw a Kyrgyzstan video. They have these amazing animations all about stress, and it painted that very picture in terms of beast in the wilderness and what that's like. And so I've heard that kind of storyline, if you will, before about, the ancient times, this was very helpful, and now it's almost counterproductive for us. But I'm wondering, we feel what we feel, Jon, to what extent do we even have control over that? I mean, stuff happens, emotions, reactions naturally flow from those things. So to what extent can we have mastery versus we are a victim of these circumstances?
I love that question because it goes exactly to the heart of the book. The capacity to make intentional choices, which I call in the book agency, that realization that even in the most dire of circumstances, we still have a choice, is the foundation for going from survival mode to thriving. What is thriving? Most people think that thriving equals success. So I'm going to say this very clearly. Thriving is not success. How do we measure success? We measure it with money, power, and reputation. These are 3 things that if you see somebody who's got a lot of them, you say this is a successful person, right? Thriving, on the other hand, it's about agency, so the capacity to make intentional choices. It's about belonging, i.e. being able to connect, to have meaningful social connections with other people. And it's about meaning. It's about seeing something in life that gives you a sense that your life matters and that the people around you matter and the way you navigate this world matters. So it's slightly different. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm not arguing against success because I think success is very helpful and very useful. By the way, I want success just as much as the next guy. What I'm suggesting here is that maybe there's a bit more of a balance that we can have between what success is and what thriving is. And that in that balance, in that nuance, there may be a lot of well-being for all of us.
Okay, well, that sounds pleasant. Could you perhaps share some studies, research, or case studies associated with folks who made the leap from frequently being in a survival mode to doing the thrive thing regularly?
Last year, there was a study published at Oxford that studied, I think it was 1,200 companies. And what they wanted to understand was the correlation between the well-being of employees, i.e. thriving, and stock market performance, the value of the company. And what they discovered is that the top 100 companies that had the highest levels of well-being outperformed the S&P 500 by 11% on average. That's a really compelling business case for anybody to say my business is going to outperform the S&P because partly it's one of the variables. And I'm implying causality now. This is just a correlational study, but I think it's still a very compelling data point.
Certainly, yeah, I could see you might argue it both ways. Well, yeah, that's easy for them because they have so much ample cash flow and appreciation, and et cetera. They can afford to invest in their employees. But I suppose it is also the case that there are large, flourishing companies that are big in revenue and profit and yet are low on thriving and could see all the more goodness with more thriving. Can you paint a chain for how more thriving means more profit?
Exactly. Well, what we know is that when we're thriving, we can lean into our agency. So this capacity to make intentional choices. And thriving usually means that we're in this space where we're calm and we can think more clearly. And that drives innovation. And we know that innovation is a great way to create value. It also drives better social connection and stronger social connection. And it's interesting because, Pete, if there was a medicine out there that increase your survival rate by 50%, decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease by 29%, decrease your risk of stroke by 32%, decrease depression and increase your well-being. If there was a drug that did all of those things for you, would you take it?
Sounds good, sure. With the side effects, but looking good, yeah.
No side effects.
All right.
The drug is social connection. So when we are thriving, we are more capable of connecting with other folks. And that social connection is what creates great organizations. What I learned, I spent over 2.5 decades in the business world, climbing the corporate ladder as fast as I could. And one of the things that I learned too late in my career, I might say, is that there are two types of value that you create at work. One of them is productive value. So this is how good you are at your job. Can you create an Excel spreadsheet that beats everybody else? Or today, can you work with AI better than everybody else? Can you create a project plan? Can you deliver a project on time and on budget? All of these things are productive value. The other value that sometimes gets really overlooked, especially for folks that are getting into leadership positions, is relational value, is the ability to create those relationships and those connections that allow big groups of people to work together and do really amazing things together.
Okay, well, that sounds super. Can you share, when it comes to social connection, what's the state of play with regard to humans, professionals, workers, and social connection?
Well, Surgeon General for the US, Vivek Murthy, published a report a couple of years ago where he spoke about, or he described, the loneliness epidemic. We know that people are more lonely today than ever before. And if you think about this, Pete, today, somebody who's 18, 20 years old can get a job and they can rent their apartment. And if they don't want to, they don't have to see anybody else for the rest of their lives. Right? You could order food in, you could get everything that you need delivered to your doorstep. You get a paycheck working remotely. So technology has given us a lot of advantages, but it has also created certain gaps in places where we otherwise had to interact with people. So there is a loneliness epidemic out there. And one of the ideas that I present in the book is this notion that when we're thriving, it's easier to connect with others. And when we connect with others, that has a ripple effect.
So the social connection contributes to thriving, and the thriving contributes to social connection. Kind of like...
You got it. Yes.
Circular, I guess, virtuous cycle up or a doom cycle down?
I love that you just used that, Pete, because that's exactly how I describe it in the book, as a spiral. There's a spiral from survival mode to thriving. And sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down. And I think one point that you made at the beginning of our conversation, which is that sometimes external circumstances are outside our control. And that happens often, right? We get laid off or we get fired from a job or a disease, we get sick. Like there are many things that happen. What I'm trying to suggest here is that even in the worst of circumstances, and by the way, one of my teachers, I would call him, is Viktor Frankl, who wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl was in concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And it was him who argued in that book that even within all that suffering, he discovered a place where he could choose his attitude. And that what he noticed was that the people who survived that horrible situation were those who could find meaning in their suffering and were those who could see a different perspective of what they were experiencing. Not the strongest ones, not the ones who had the most muscle, the ones who were taller or bigger, the ones who had more money. It was the people who found meaning.
Yes. And fun fact, I believe Man's Search for Meaning is, when I ask about favorite things, comes up the most often as favorite book, favorite quote. So it's a powerful book and a beautiful one. And so in practice, let's say stuff happens and we're freaking out. What do we do in the moment?
So I went deep into the research and tried to understand, how do we create more agency? If agency is the capacity to make intentional choices, supported by the belief that those choices matter and have an impact on the world, how do we increase that? And as I reviewed the research and I reviewed all the fantastic work that has been done by scientists over the past 2.5 decades, because this is a relatively new topic, this topic of thriving in science. I mean, philosophers have been talking about it for thousands of years, but there were 3 things that came up that seem really, really important. And I summarized them in an acronym, A.I.R. And A.I.R stands for A for awareness, I for inquiry, and R for reframing. And when we are faced with a difficult situation or a difficult emotion or a negative thought, using A.I.R as a practice can be a really powerful way to develop the skill that is agency and go a little bit more from survival mode into thriving.
Okay, so awareness, inquiry, reframing. Could you share with us what that could look like in practice?
Of course. My youngest son, who's 9, went to summer camp earlier this year. But 3 days before going to summer camp, he broke his arm and he had a cast all the way up to his shoulder. So while his friends were jumping in the lake, he was playing with a Rubik's Cube. I'm going to try and use this Rubik's Cube to explain a little bit how A.I.R works. So when we're going through a difficult moment, it feels like the Rubik's Cube is right next to our face, right next to our eye. And we can only see one of the little squares, right? You've probably heard people say, I feel like I'm seeing red, right? Like we're actually just seeing one color, one square of the Rubik's Cube. What awareness does is it allows us to create some distance from the situation. It allows us to actually notice that, okay, what's happening here is not just red. Red is actually just one square amongst 9 other squares. And if I actually start kind of looking at the Rubik's Cube, I can see that it has 6 sides and each side has 9 squares. So now I have a lot more information. That's what awareness does for us.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go into inquiry. And inquiry is actually getting to understand what the situation looks like. And that's asking a lot of non-judgmental, curious questions about the situation. And that means basically it's like playing around with the Rubik's Cube, just figuring out the different formulas and the different combinations that you can see in a Rubik's Cube. And reframing is when you find a combination that works for you. And that might be solving the Rubik's Cube, or it might be something different, but it's a combination that works for you in the moment. So that's a short, brief description of how A.I.R works.
Okay, so understood with the Rubik's Cube analogy. You can visualize that and notice that you could be way zoomed in and that's not so helpful. Could you walk us through that as applied to a situation?
So after 2.5 decades in the corporate world, I decided to go into a startup. And we did great. We raised a Series B of $150 million. The company was growing at double digits every month. We were, as the kids would say, crushing it. And as we raised this money, I flew to LA to buy some new facilities because we were expanding the business to LA. And when I flew back, I got hit with COVID and I was on a call with a technical team about some sort of technical stuff. and the call got really heated up. And I was deep, deep into survival mode.
Heated up. Tell me more, Jon. Were they pointing the finger at you?
They were pointing the finger.
Okay.
Or at least that's how I interpreted it in the moment, right? That was the interpretation. I was so close to the situation, I was seeing red. So what I did is I shut off my laptop and turned off my phone. And in that moment, I was able to gain some awareness. I got some distance from the situation. I said, goodness gracious, am I angry right now? Right? I noticed the heat rising in my body. My chest got tight. My breathing got shallow. My shoulders got really tense. So I heard my kids playing in the basement, and I went downstairs to the basement, and they were sitting on the floor playing with Legos. So I sat on the floor with them and I started playing with them for about an hour. And as I was doing that, I started, well, number one, I was present with them. I was able to actually sit with them and share with them, which is something that I hadn't done for months. So that experience to me, it allowed me to find a little bit of thriving in that deep, deep state of survival mode. After that, I went and sat on my chair and I started reflecting on one of my favorite chairs, and I started reflecting on the situation. And the reframing for me was, in that moment, it was, I had two kids because I wanted to be a dad, and I'm not actually being a dad. I'm present, like they see me at breakfast, they see me at dinner, but I'm not physically present, but I'm not present with them. And that was really, really challenging. So Adriana walked in, my wife, and she said, so are you okay? And I said, I'm done. I think I'm done. And within 2 weeks, I decided to unwind myself from that job and to walk away. So my reframe in that moment was seeing the other option that I hadn't seen before. Because for the longest time, as I was working, I said, if I quit this job, I'll be living under a bridge in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that felt very real to me. In that moment, I realized, well, what's the point of all of this that I'm doing if I cannot be present for the people that I love and that I want to be with?
Okay. So the awareness of, hey, I'm getting really angry. It might be wise to go do something else. And then inquiring, asking those questions, and then reframing the prior belief that you had and sort of seeing new things come from it. Understood. What's interesting with regard to the inquiry, can you share a few more of those specific questions? Like, what's the point of this? What are some more questions you were inquiring there?
Yeah. So what are my options right now? What's important to me? What are my values? What is it that I want to do with my life? What does this look like for me if I continue down this path for the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? How is this impacting my health? How is this impacting my relationships? How is this impacting my sleep? So all of these questions asked in a non-judgmental way. And what I mean by that is that we have to actually be curious about it. Because if I'm asking a question and I already have the answer, it's not really a question, is it? So we want to challenge ourselves to do this. Now, in that moment, it was a process that I did internally as a result of burnout and a very difficult experience. But in day-to-day life, we can do this in partnership with other people, with our friends, with a coach, with whatever it is, the people that are around us. Some people do it journaling. This exploration can be a really powerful way to get to know ourselves better and then to make decisions that are more agentic.
And I like what you had to say about the genuine curiosity, because I think it's quite possible in that state, some of your questions can sound like, what's their problem? Why do I always have to deal with this bull crap? Why is this happening to me? Et cetera, et cetera. Like any number of questions that are not guided by a wholesome curiosity, but rather just stoke the rage beast.
You got it. And often we tend to focus on things that are outside our locus of control. Instead of focusing on what we can change, on what's under our capacity to influence, we focus on what everybody else is doing. And unfortunately, it's really hard to change other people. Trust me, I've tried for many years, and it's very difficult to change other people. But we do have the prerogative to change ourselves and to grow in the way that feels most authentic to us.
Well, could you give us another example of awareness, inquiry, and reframing in action that don't result in a full exit, but rather being able to better deal with a current situation?
Yeah, what I love most about that question, Pete, is that you are hitting the nail on the head on the spectrum of agency. So very low agency would be, I have no choice here. And if there's a moment in your life where you say, I have no choice here, number one, you are likely in survival mode. And number two, there's an open door there to practice A.I.R, to practice awareness, inquiry, and reframing. Then if we go a little bit higher on the spectrum of agency, you could say, well, I can stay or I can leave, right? So I only have two choices here. I either have to walk away or I can stay in my job. If you had really high agency, once we've really developed agency, then you start seeing, instead of black and white, you start seeing a rainbow of options and opportunities in front of you. So you could say, well, I could stay and modify my job, change my hours, go to part-time, change my boss, move to a different division, whatever that looks like. Or I could leave and go to another job or rest or paint for a year. I don't know, whatever it is. And I understand that for a lot of people, there's actually not a choice available to them, right? Because if you have to pay the rent and you are living paycheck to paycheck, this doesn't necessarily happen. And this is why developing agency in the moment is so important.
Yes. Whenever I hear the phrase, I have to or I can't, I get skeptical. And so, and maybe I am on the autistic spectrum and I take things super literally at times. But I think, is that really true? And I'm thinking about the book Nonviolent Communication by
Marshall
Rosenberg.
Yes.
And he really brings up some points. Like, even if you think you're stuck, it's kind of wild what you can do. And he gives an example of, he thought, I have to keep... I said, I don't like paying taxes because they're supporting, at the time, I think, the Vietnam War. And he was against the war. And he said, well, I guess I have to pay taxes because, that's the law and I'm a citizen. And he said, well, you know what? I suppose if I didn't have income, I wouldn't have to pay taxes. And so he made some dramatic changes. And then he also challenges teachers who say, well, I have to do all this frequent testing of the students because it's required by the district and that's just a part of my job. And it's like, well, you also have the option of changing your job. So it's a more accurate framing of the situation is, I need to do this testing for my students frequently if I want to retain my job and my income here. So that is my choice. Do I choose to play the game and maintain my job and my income here? Or do I choose something else? It's like, well, I guess I am going to keep my job here. But even working through that process contributes to more of the thriving feelings.
Absolutely. And I love so much that you brought up Marshall Rosenberg, because I think this is exact what he's arguing for in these examples is this idea of reframing, changing the framing of the situation. And we get to do that. And one of the important concepts here is that we tend to buy into these absolute truths, right? That something has to be true. And one of the interesting things in science that I don't think has become as widely popular as it should be is that science thrives on dissent. It thrives on challenging. If you're a scientist that agrees with all of their peers, you are highly unlikely to succeed. The whole point is that we want this type of creative dissent. So when somebody presents you with a premise, is there an opportunity to do a lot of inquiry and challenge that premise and figure out if it's really true? So one good example that has worked really well is a lot of people say, well, but 2 + 2 is 4. Well, but 2 + 2 is not always 4, right? There's an axiom that tells us that the first number is 0, and then you add 1, and it's 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. That's the axiom that a lot of us do math with, or arithmetic. But if you're looking at a clock, right, after 2,300 hours, so if you say 23 + 2, it's not 25. It's 1, right? So it's a different axiom that we're using. So what I'm trying to present here is that we get to challenge the things that we believe to be true. And this is a uniquely human capacity, and it's incredibly powerful.
Certainly. And then you get me thinking in terms of, well, if our objective is to get to 4, there's many ways that we might achieve the getting to 4. And perhaps addition is not even the operation that we're after in a given situation.
You got it. So So we can come at things from different angles once we have awareness. Once we move that Rubik's Cube a little bit away from our face, we can actually start exploring all of the angles. And it's a practice, right? It sounds easy when I say awareness, inquiry, and reframing, right? It sounds so simple. But many of us spend years, if not decades, trying to bring more awareness to our lives. So mindfulness is something that can work to bring more awareness, and a mindfulness practice, being able to be present in the moment. Those are some of the things that we can do in order to hone our skill of awareness. And then inquiry, learning to ask good questions. That's a difficult skill. That requires a lot of practice, right? And then reframing is actually seeing different angles. And all of those things require, it's like, they're like a muscle, right? And if we go to the gym to get buff, we can practice this to agency.
Mm-hmm. And one place you advocate practicing this is by examining our beliefs and seeing if there's some limiting beliefs. Can you expand on this?
Yeah. So beliefs are like lenses that we have over our eyes, and they kind of filter the world for us, right? There's lots of evidence to suggest that beliefs are so powerful that they can even change the way in which we react to pain. For example, the placebo effect. And this has been documented many, many times, that when you're in pain, you can take a placebo and they tell you that it's pain medication, and your pain actually decreases. So our beliefs are very, very powerful filters with which we navigate the world. One of the things in the work that I do coaching clients is trying to name the belief, right? So in my case, I said, I believe that if I walk away from this job, I'm going to be living under a bridge in less than 2 weeks, and I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. I had to challenge that belief and say, well, is that actually true? Or is there a different way to look at this belief? And I said, well, I have friends, I have a family, I have a social support network. I know people will help me out. If I can't have income, I have some money in the bank, or I can move to a smaller place. So there are all of these things. The moment you take that belief and you challenge the belief, then you can step into a world of options. Then you step into that rainbow of options, as opposed to seeing the world in just white, just black, or black and white only.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. Can you give us an example of some other limiting beliefs that you've seen folks successfully challenge and have great results on the other side?
I think the toughest belief to challenge, and I struggle with this every day, and I think it's one of the big reasons why I wrote the book, and it's a through line in the book, is the belief that I am not good enough. The flip side of that is the belief that I have to prove myself. Because we live in this system where productivity defines value, right? Productivity equals value. I've asked dozens of clients the question, what would your value be if suddenly you could not produce anymore? And people are stumped. It's really hard to respond to that question. What happens if I can't produce? Well, I could still, talk my way through something or whatever it is. No, but you cannot produce. So challenging the belief that our worth is tied to our productivity is very liberating work. And it's very challenging work because this is a deeply ingrained belief.
Okay. Well, so walk us through the process of that challenging and what might come out the other side.
I think it's sitting with it. It's the first thing that we do is creating awareness, naming it. Is this a belief that you're buying into? Do you buy into the belief that if you don't produce, you're not good enough? Pause for a second and just notice. Is this something that sounds true to you? If it does, then get really curious about it. So where does this belief come from? Whose voice do I hear in my head when I say that I believe this? What has this belief, how has it served me in my life? What has it done for me, right? In my case, that belief allowed me to climb the corporate ladder ruthlessly for decades, right? So it served me really well in many, many ways. And eventually I came to the reframing of saying there's fundamental value in just existing, in just being a human. We are a wonder of nature. Think about it. Earth has been around for what, 4 billion years? And we're here, you and I, Pete, having this conversation. That in itself, it's a miracle. We're sitting in this one galaxy out of, I think there's like 2 trillion of them in the universe, and this universe continues to expand. So it's really magical, the fact that we exist. So is that fundamental value? And what challenging that belief did for me was allow me to give myself the space, for example, to end up thinking about the ideas that eventually I decided that I wanted to put into a book. So I started to question. It's existentialism, right? You start questioning why we're here and what does that mean?
It is a powerful belief to look at directly. And we covered this on episode 500 with Victor Chang, talking about building unshakable confidence and having the belief that I am valuable or worthwhile simply because I exist. And you could see that in, wisdom traditions or religion, Christianity being made in the image and likeness of God, or the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's interesting because it's an idea that I purport to believe, and I like to believe it on my best days. And yet I do feel some discomfort. If I imagine a universe in which I am, say, in a vegetative state at a hospital, I am existing, but I am not doing or quote unquote adding value, I sometimes think, well, yes, I value just because I'm existent, I am a human being. And other times it doesn't feel that way, that the belief doesn't feel true. So yeah, no pressure, Jon, but how do we deal with that one?
I don't know. I don't know. This is a profound existential question that you're asking, Pete. And I think the exercise of just questioning it is a pathway to thriving. Just being able for a moment to hold that notion that you have fundamental value just by existing, and just believing that 0.0000001% in your life, I think that in itself, it's a gift. Listen, Pete, I struggle with it every day. I've been doing this work. I went back to school and learned psychology so I could challenge that belief. I've read lots of papers and lots of books trying to challenge this belief. And I don't have a clear answer. I don't think there's a recipe. And I actually, as a matter of fact, what I would suggest, and this is one of the things that I did in the book, and it was hard for me to find a publisher because a lot of the publishers kept telling me, Jon, you have to be more prescriptive. People want to know exactly what they need to do. And I kept saying, well, I'm writing about agency. If I'm telling people that the whole point is that you learn what's right for you and that you have to develop, or you can develop, you don't have to do anything, but you can develop this muscle that gives you access to thriving in your life, how am I going to sit there and tell you exactly how you do it? I don't have a recipe for it. I think we each have to find our own way through.
And it's funny, where my brain is going is thinking that I have value just by existing, even in that comatose state, because by providing an opportunity for others to be of service and reflect upon their gifts, their blessings, their capabilities, that is of value and beneficial. And yet I could see I'm already drifting into territories like, well, then that's not intrinsic. It's like, it's what I'm doing for other people.
Exactly.
By doing nothing.
Yeah, it's a tough idea to grasp, especially because the system where we are living is built on this belief of productivity equals value, right? So it's really hard to think outside of that unless maybe we go to meditate in some mountain for 20 years. Maybe we can access that. That's not my choice. That's agentically speaking, that's not something that I want to do. And I do want to be able to sit there sometimes with the discomfort of feeling like I'm not good enough or that I have to prove myself. And as I'm sitting with that discomfort, having a small window where I can challenge it and I can say, well, maybe I do have fundamental value. Maybe I do have intrinsic value just for existing. And that in itself can be quite comforting. At least it has been for me. And also anxiety inducing.
One perspective I like to bring to this is I think about my children when I watch them sleep. And They're beautiful, adorable. I love them. And they are doing nothing there, but I am not disappointed with them. I don't want or demand or need them to be doing anything. Them just existing in that space, I find valuable and beautiful and excellent and full of love. With them doing nothing at all, they are just existing.
What a beautiful and powerful reflection, Pete. And I think that the emotion and the moment in which we experience that type of connection that you're describing that you have with your kids, that's thriving.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So more of that would be great.
Oh, goodness. It's not easy, right? It requires effort because we are designed for survival. Our bodies and our brains are designed for survival. There's this evolutionary mismatch that has occurred where technology has taken us to this point where we have, listen, by all measures, we are living in the golden age of humanity. And I know we see different things on social media, we see different things in the news, but if you look at access to water, access to food, access to education, access to healthcare, longevity, Pete, 100 years ago, you and I would be buried 6 feet underground because the life expectancy, well, I'm not sure how old you are, but life expectancy was 32. Today's more than double that, right? So we are in this golden age of humanity. And for some reason, anxiety and depression seem to be one of those persistent things that we don't understand what is happening. And one of the explanations that seems to make a lot of sense is that our brains and our bodies have not evolved to keep up with the world that we're living in today. So what I'm suggesting is that agency may be one of the antidotes to this experience that we're having as humans living in this age.
Yeah, well, that's big stuff, and you can sit with it for a while. And I think the word value is key there. And so in terms of economic value, I say it may be true. That if we're not doing anything, we are not producing money dollars, economic value, but in a deeper sense, our human value remains.
Exactly. And why do we see so many people who have supposedly made it, right? Billionaires, trillionaires now. We're going to start having trillionaires soon. Why do we see so many people who have access, economically speaking, to all of the resources? I mean, the wealth distribution gap has never been larger in humanity either. So why do we see people who have all of this and still struggle to thrive? And we see it in the way they communicate. We see it in the way in which they relate to the world. It's a challenging thing to experience. And so that's why I want to make sure that we separate the ideas of success and thriving. And I'm sure there's a Venn diagram, right? Or the two overlap, and that's a happy middle. And that's what I'm arguing for trying to find more moments of thriving, even if it's at the cost of letting go some of the success, which is the hardest thing to do.
I like that Venn diagram approach because it also gets you thinking it's entirely possible to thrive without being successful.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A resounding yes.
Cool. Well, Jon, we've gone into all kinds of profound places. Can you tell me, before I hear about your favorite things, a few of your top tips, your do's and don'ts for getting more thriving going?
I would say the first thing is find time for reflection or for a practice that works for you, whatever that is. I tried to meditate for 2 years. I have a meditation pillow right here in my office. And I sat in that pillow for 2 years. I sat on that pillow trying to meditate and I hated it. My goodness, could I not do it? I just couldn't do it. I decided one day somebody suggested a walking meditation. So I put on my headphones and I went for a walk. And I was like, oh, I can do this. This suddenly changed my life. So today I go for even 2-hour long walking meditations that I can do with or without headphones, guided or unguided. I had to find the activity that was the right fit for me. So a do is find activities, test many different things, call them little experiments or however you want to name them. Test many different things until you find the one that works for you. Because there are a lot of prescriptions out there that will work for many people. Listen, even cognitive behavior therapy, which is the gold standard for therapy in that world, only benefits about 40%, in the best case, 80% of people. So it doesn't mean that it's for everybody. So find whatever works for you. That would be the do. The don't is just waiting for something magical to happen. We have to use our agency, our capacity as humans to make change happen. It has to come from inside. Nobody can make change happen for you. It's something that we all have to own and take it upon ourselves. And it's hard and it's painful. But in my experience, a lot of times the discomfort of staying the same, it's much worse than the discomfort of changing.
Big thanks to Jon for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsor to check out is Vanguard. For all the financial advisors listening, let's talk bonds for a minute. Capturing value in fixed income is not easy. Bond markets are massive, murky, and a lot of firms will just throw a couple flashy funds your way and call it a day. But not Vanguard. Vanguard bonds provide top-grade products across the board. Their lineup includes over 80 bond funds actively managed by a 200-person global squad of sector specialists, analysts, and traders. Vanguard's been in the game for a long time at a scale that gives them a serious edge. They're able to invest across many sectors, maturities, and geographies, spotting opportunities that others might miss. Vanguard takes a steady approach, focusing on reliability and consistency. So if you're looking to give your clients consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at Vanguard.com/audio. That's Vanguard.com/audio. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor. One sponsor to check out is Tailor. Tailor is an award-winning AI and expert-styled menswear rental subscription service featured in GQ, Vogue, and more. Tailor's mission is to help people look good so they can achieve their personal and professional goals while reducing fashion waste to support a more sustainable future. Some guys are hard to shop for. They seem to have everything. Tailor solves that by offering many style choices. We're talking 20,000 garments, 2,000 styles, 300 brands curated just for them, making it a thoughtful clothing gift that they'll actually wear. I personally really enjoyed how quickly, easily, and delightfully I was cruising through my online style quiz. And with renting, there's no need to worry about shopping, commitment, laundry, or landfill with your clothes. So give the gift of time, convenience, and effortless style. Visit Tailor.style and get 10% off Tailor gift cards with the code PODCASTGIFT. That's TAELOR.style and use code PODCASTGIFT for 10% off Tailor gift cards. One sponsor to check out is Quince. Quince makes the essentials every guy needs. Mongolian cashmere sweaters for $50, Italian wool coats that look and feel designer, and pants that fit just right. Each piece is made from premium materials by trusted factories that meet rigorous standards for craftsmanship and ethics. Quince delivers luxury quality at a fraction of the price. I have been loving my Quince cashmere beanie this December. I'm reaching for it almost every single day. My whole family is genuinely excited when we see another Quince box appear at the door. And their shipping and returns are wildly fast and easy. So get your wardrobe sorted and your gift list handled with Quince. Don't wait. Go to quince.com/awesome for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/awesome. Free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/awesome. Okay. Well, now could you share with us a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
One of my favorite quotes is from William James, one of the fathers of psychology, and I actually have it here on my wall. And it's, "My experience is what I agree to attend to."
Yeah.
Attention.
Work on that for a while.
Yes. Attention is a powerful resource, and it's non-renewable for humans. Once we've given it, it's gone. And we have so many things fighting for our attention today. If we can be more agentic as to where we place our attention, that can be a life-changing practice.
Oh, yeah, that's powerful. What I agree to attend to is like, we need not attend to necessarily anything just because it's all over Twitter. The headlines are saying this. My feed, all my recommended YouTube videos is like, yeah, and we always have that choice. I can choose to attend to that. I can agree or I can disagree to attend to a matter. And we've always got the power.
Let's look at the numbers on this just very quickly. Every second, the sensory input that we get, it's between 10 and 100 million bits of information every second. Only about 10 to 50 filter into our conscious awareness. And of those 10 to 50 that filter into our conscious awareness, usually there is a 5-to-1 negativity ratio. I mean, that's the negativity bias that we look for. You post something on Instagram and you get 20 likes and 300 comments saying you're amazing. But there's one comment that's negative, and we will focus on the negative comment. That's the negativity bias at play. Imagine if we can actually learn how to better manage what we agree to attend to. It's life-changing because you have 100 million choices and you only get to do 10 to 50. So that's a really powerful practice.
Okay. And a favorite book?
It's a book about therapy, actually. Her name is Marsha Linehan, and she created something called dialectical behavior therapy. And she wrote her autobiography. And one of the powerful ideas in that book that really resonated with me is the idea of dialectics, that two things that seem opposing can be true at the same time. And I think that's a really powerful way to look at the world and to understand complexity.
All right. And if folks want to learn more or get in touch, where'd you point them?
You can go to my LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Jon Rosemberg. You can go to my website, jonrosemberg.com. And yeah, that's the best way to reach me.
All right. And you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
Yes. Take the time to hone in the skill of agency. However it works for you. Just take the time to understand it and to play around with it. It can be life-changing.
All right. Jon, thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate Jon's framework, particularly the reframing perspective, because we have the ability to tell whatever story we like about a matter. And if it's helpful, go ahead and run with it. I remember one time someone made a comment to me that they thought I was being a bit extreme or excessive. And at first I didn't appreciate that. I was like, oh, what do you mean? I was getting kind of riled up in my internal dialogue. And I thought, you know what? I suppose I could just reframe that story as a compliment. In what ways has my extremeness or excessiveness in this domain produced some great results? Oh, A, B, C, and D. All right, well, perhaps to be called extreme or excessive in these domains is indeed complimentary and something to feel proud of. And sure enough, that neutralized a lot of the yuck and put me in a much better groove. Great stuff from Jon. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please mosey on over to awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1114. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.
Big news! Wayfair's Black Friday sale is here. Right now, score up to 80% off everything home. These are our best deals of the year. Shop Wayfair's Black Friday sale now at wayfair.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.